All hail, and welcome back to another episode. So today is a first. It's a first, and Lord willing, a mini series of videos titled "Oh, Bring Them Back." Many of our church members are familiar with that particular phrase. It was a phrase that Prophet William S. Crowdy told the saints at the time to bring them back, bring the church together, and let the saints rejoice. And so this series called "Oh, Bring Them Back" is a number of videos and or biopics or just a series of biographies, newspaper reports, genealogy, just bringing back the early members of the church, those who joined the church in 1896 and were followers and were followers of Prophet William S. Crowdy and the Church of God and Saints of Christ. And many of these people have stories that maybe many of that have never been told, or that many of us don't know about, and so I am attempting to share some of those stories. I don't have a large selected group. I just kind of whatever I can piece together, I just kind of I report about. And when doing some research about the church, I ran across this person, this saint, who is named Miss Ellen Burton. And she had a write-up about her. She's from Emporia, Kansas, and she had a write-up about her that I would like to share. And also with maybe some more information about her. And I did a little bit of a genealogy search through Ancestry just to find out more about her parents and maybe where they were from. So I'm just going to read this article and go into some other aspects of her life. And so this article is in the Emporia Weekly Gazette, Thursday, November 10th, 1949. Let me see if I can pull up the whole paper. Here it is. Miss Ellen Burton is a member of Emporia's first colored family. It says here that life was primitive in the vicinity of commercial streets when Miss Ellen O'Dear Burton, 105 South State, came to Emporia. The town was a settlement of houses and business buildings on top of the rise between the Cottonwood and the Neosho rivers. The population was about 500 when O'Dear family came to Kansas in 1863 with a group of Union soldiers who were rescuing them from the rebels in Arkansas. They were the first colored family in Emporia. Miss Burton was a little girl when the family arrived. She is now in her 94th year, but she recalls many of the incidents that happened so long ago. She is a small woman with beautiful hands. They are not the long, tampering, well-kept hands usually considered beautiful, but they tell the story of her life, a life filled with care and hard work, fun and laughter. They are happy, busy hands that seem to express a satisfaction in life. They are work-worn and wrinkled, with a wedding ring deeply embedded in the skin, but they are strong hands that hold power and humility in their grasp. As she talked, her Bible rested in her lap, her hands resting on it. Being the first colored family in Emporia was only the beginning of a long list of. The children were the first colored children to attend school in Emporia, were the first colored people to pay taxes in Lyons County, the first to own property in Lyons County. The family name is spelled both O'Dear and Adair, but the original spelling is Adair. Miss Burton's mother, D.C. O'Dear, was born in North Carolina, but she was taken to Springfield, Missouri when she was a little girl and sold away from her mother for work in the fields near Little Rock, Arkansas, as a slave. While she was still a slave, D.C. met Henry Adair, and they were married in Little Rock. Her master, Jim Moore, was a hard man, extremely cruel, Miss Burton said, remembering stories her mother had told. Miss Moore was a kind person, and before she died, she made him, I'm assuming Mr. Moore, promise to keep all the slave children and their mothers together. She asked them never to sell. Moore promised, but after her death, he remarried and advertised that he had niggers to sell. Among the slaves he sold was the oldest of the Adair children, Anderson. Moore had broken his promise to his dead wife, and the Adairs never saw their son again. But we're lucky at that, Miss Burton hastened to say. War came on, and the Union soldiers made it so hot for the rebels that they had to run away from their homes and plantations and left a black man to look after their families, she said. Father came at night with the Indians and wagons from Mother and her small children. They were Caroline, Joe, John, Hannah, and myself. The older ones were tied on ponies and were taken to the Union fort. The soldiers halted and asked where they were going. Mother couldn't tell them, so Colonel Proctor had us taken inside the fort. Mother cooked for the officers at the camp. She was a wonderful woman, Miss Burton said, a faraway look in her eyes. Colonel Burton lived in Emporia, and he and several of the Union soldiers were coming here to visit. As I remember, they were Paul Dick, H.G. I want to say that's Bundrum, Clark Bundrum, Frank Smidlin, and several others. Captain Lemuel T. Heritage was captain of the Union soldiers. The Indians came as guides with the group as the covered wagon made its way to Kansas. One sad thing, my mother said, happened when they were on their way here. The soldiers captured 4 rebels and had them stand by side while the Indian soldiers shot them down. Mother cried because she thought they ought not to kill him, but she dared not say anything. She explained, "We landed here June 20th, 1863, the first colored family seen in Emporia. Colonel Proctor took us to his home and was so good to us. He got us places on a farm. Mother had worked in fields like a man when she was in bondage and knew how to work on a farm. Father had belonged to the Indians, and they didn't work so hard as the white man had Mother." So it sounds like that her mother was owned by a white man named Moore, and the father was owned by Indians. All right, so father had belonged to the Indians, and they didn't work him so hard as the white man had Mother. He was a cook in the Indian farm until the war came. They turned him loose and allowed each child of the slaves to have 150 acres and grass money. But We never got it. We were too glad and happy to leave the South. Several times after they came to Kansas, Henry O'Dear tried to get his land in Oklahoma. The family still had affidavits stating when they came here. One by Paul Beck tells a bit about the family. I knew Henry O'Dear and wife and small children when they first come to this place, the affidavit reads. John O'Dear and one other was his children and was with them when I first saw him. Will O'Dear, his son, was born later. This was in the first year of 1853. They came here with a man by the name of Proctor, who had a contract to furnish food to the Indians in the territory, and he used to run wagon trains back and forth between here and the territory. Proctor came up here in 1863 and brought Henry O'Dear and his family of children and his wife with them. They were the first colored people here. There was also another colored man here. There was also another colored man came up here later on in 1865. The O'Dear family and the children worked in and around the town for different people wherever they could get work. The old lady O'Dear took in washings here and finally built a shack on a lot at 3rd and Commercial Street. She got the lot from Ed Burton, who gave it to her for doing washings. 6 children were born in the South. Miss Burton went on. 5 were born in Lyons County. Miss Carrie Stepper, who died September 10th, was the first born in the South. She was 109 years, 6 months, and 3 days old when she died. There was also twin sisters, Hannah and Ellen. I am the only one left of those born in the South, Miss Burton said. She is the Ellen of the set of twins. When Miss Stepper died September 10th, she was one of the nation's oldest living persons. A story written by a member of the family tells of her life. She was the oldest of 15, I want to say that says 15. Oh no, I'm sorry, 11 children, born to Henry and D.C. O'Dear. It reads, she was born in the ungodly years of slavery and knew the anguish and sorrow of being a slave. Yet after being freed, she retained no hatred in her heart for those who had enslaved her, but through her faith in God was enabled to say, Father, forgive them. She, together with other members of her family, was brought to Lyons County, Kansas on June 20th, 1863, where they sought and found sanctuary in Emporia. There she resided for a number of years, after which she moved to Eureka. From there she moved to Oklahoma while it was yet a territory, and there took up homestead. Then, after disposing of her holdings, she moved to California, where she remained her residence until the time of her death. Her host of friends and relatives all feel that somewhere along the lengthy road she traveled, she undoubtedly met God and walked in his precepts in such a manner as to find pleasure in his sight and cause him to lengthen her days far beyond the promised span of life. Carrie was the first colored child to go to white schools here, Miss Burton said. She lived with the Swallers, the town banker, and they taught her to read and speak great speeches. The first time she made a speech in public, they fired off a cannon, and she was so frightened she could hardly finish her piece. Miss Burton went on speaking of the other children. My brother was the first colored child born in Lyons County. The white people named him Abraham Lincoln, and he was known as A.L. He used to work in Charlie Ryder's drugstore. Mr. Ryder promoted him as high as clerk. He studied to be a lawyer but changed his mind and went to California. Miss Burton has one living brother, Harry O'Dear, the baby of the family. He is 74 and lives in Parsons. She loves to speak of her 7 brothers, and she is especially proud that they were all legal citizens and had no criminal records of any kind. They were independent, industrious, and owned their own homes, she said. Miss Burton's father was never a strong man, and he could not often do hard work. He chopped wood sometimes, often as much as 3 cords a day, a record for any man. He also worked for Jacob Stollier in printing press. He was small in stature, and people used to go see him perched on his high stool, hand-setting type before typecase. Miss Burton remembers. After the family moved to town from the farm, Miss Adair washed for people and helped make a living for the family. Our first home was made of logs, Miss Burton recalled. J.R. Sodden gave us the timber, and Mother sawed it up and had it made into planks, and then she built our house. Miss Burton went through all the grades in school here and remembers the names of all her teachers. J. Watson, Ann Ankley, Miss Spencer, Josie Scolum, or Locum, Mr. Carmichael, Nellie Cole. She was promoted out of all the low grades and went to the normal school. L.B. Kellogg and Professor Norton were teachers at the normal. She went to college only a short time because her parents were poor and she had to quit school and go home to take care of the family. She married Ben Burton in 1880 and had 4 children, 3 boys and 1 girl. We moved to Eureka, and my husband walked off and left me with 4 small children, the baby not yet a year old. She worked hard to rear her children. Her husband married another woman, but she never remarried. I moved back to my hometown Emporia in 1890. It was, I think, I was kind of an expert at washing. At least everyone said I was. I washed and worked hard and took care of my children. She was a member of the Church of God and Saints of Christ. She received the gospel by revelation, she said. I've done lots of traveling in my work as an evangelist, she said. I am licensed to preach the gospel and have traveled from Atlantic to the Pacific. I have 3 boys in the Army: Ulysses J. Burton in the Spanish-American War, Walter Burton in the First World War. He died on sea September 11th, 1918. I received his body October 3rd, and he was buried here by the American Legion Post. Lorenzo Howard Burton, who now lives in Wichita, was also in the First World War. She also raised 4 grandchildren, 3 boys, 1 girl. The baby was 10 days old when she took them. They were Euless children. She has 4 generations of descendants living. 2 grandsons, whom she reared, were in World War II. Dave Burton, PFC Grant Burton. Grant is in the Army and is serving in Germany. You can say I am strong for temperance, Miss Burton said, explaining a bit about herself. I am also a staunch Republican. I know there is good in some Democrats, like President Truman. He says things that are right, that God would have him say. So, yes, one of the picture snippets, it says the baby of the O'Dear family, Harry O'Dear, 74, Parsons, keeps legal papers of the affidavits proving that the family was the first colored family in Emporia. His favorite hobbies are carving pictures with a penknife from papers and magazines and mounting them. So this is the Adair family, Miss Ellen Burton. And as you can see, it says here that she was a member of the Church of God and Saints of Christ. She received the gospel by revelation, she said. This was the printout from the Weekly Gazette, November 10th, 1949, of Ellen Burton. And I was able to do a little bit more research on her and gathering some more newspapers about her. Let me see if I got some more clippings. Here we go. So, let's see. Oh, here we go. This is a article in the Palladium item, Richmond, Indiana, August 8th, 1927. This is the Presbytery Board holds session here on Monday. The Presbytery Board of the General Assembly of the Church of God and Saints of Christ was in session Monday afternoon at the local church on South L Street, with visiting evangelists present from various states. The session would continue until Thursday. Among the visitors present were Bishop James M. Groves of California, the official head, Bishop R.L. Connors, Dayton, Ohio, I. Wilson, Detroit, Michigan, J. Scott, Buffalo, J.R. Dickerson, Hagerstown, Maryland, W.H. Minor, Chicago, C.E. Yancey, New Haven, Connecticut, Ellen Burton, Emporia, Kansas. So as you can see, she was in the mix of all the ministers who make up the Western Division of the Church of God and Saints of Christ. And this was the assembly in 1927. Let's continue. And here we see that this is another article, which this is the assembly in Indiana, another article from that. And here, if you come down to this paragraph, it says the Presbytery Board meeting will be held in the mornings at 9 o'clock, and the Women's Auxiliary will hold its meetings beginning at 10 o'clock. Chief Ellen Burton of Emporia, Kansas, will preside these meetings. So, as you can see, she was a chief evangelist of the daughters in the Western Division in the Church of God and Saints of Christ. And so she was a very active and she evangelized, as was said in her biop. She had evangelized from the Atlantic to the Pacific in the Church of God and Saints of Christ. All right. Here it's titled Ellen Burton 1911 Passover. J.M. Groves, Frank Brown, Miss Fanny Thompson, Miss Mary Redman, and Miss Ellen Burton returned Friday night from Dayton. So I assume the Passover was in Dayton based on this date of April 24th, 1911. They attended the annual convention of the Church of God. All right, and these are just some of the articles of Ellen Burton. I see here, this article is on Topeka, Kansas, 1903. Miss D.C. Adair, Aunt D.C. And her mom, she died in 1903, 5 o'clock. She was born in North Carolina and moved to Springfield, Missouri. She was sold from her mother. She was then taken to Arkansas, where she remained until 1863. She was a member of the AME Church since its foundation. About 5 years previous to her death, she was immersed by Elder Sidney. So she was part of her mother, D.C. O'Dear. Her mother was part of the church also. So her mother was part of the church, and she was, this name is familiar, Elder Sidney. Elder Sidney is a familiar minister. She was immersed by Elder Sidney of the Church of God. She leaves to mourn her loss a husband who is quite low and 6 children. Carrie Stepter, Miss Ellen Burton, Joseph William, John, Harry O'Dear, Reverend John A. Gregg of the AME Church, assisted by Brother S. West of the Church of God, conducted the funeral service. Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord. And so her mother, the mother of Ellen Burton, she also joined the church, Miss D.C. O'Dear. Miss D.C. O'Dear. Let's keep going. All right. And so those are some of the newspaper articles that I was able to find. And so I also did a small genealogy search on Ancestry. And I did a small tree. Let me find the tree. Let's go to the tree of the Burton family. Let's go home. Tree. Burton family. Okay, so as you can see here, this is Ellen Burton, and she had a bunch of siblings that were mentioned. I probably had to add those later, but this is her and her father, Henry O'Dear, and this is D.C. O'Dear, who we just read about, her obituary in 1903. And it looks like Henry O'Dear may have passed away the same year. Yeah. Wow. Passed away the same year as his wife. And as it was mentioned, it said he was quite low, so he probably passed away from a broken heart. And so here we have DC. She was, as it was said, she went to Arkansas, but it said here that she was born in North Carolina, and then she went to Arkansas later. And here we have Henry O'Dear. If we look at him and look at some of his, let's just do a search on Henry and see what his. So Henry, as we can see, the census, 1870, in the 1870 census, we have Henry O'Dear, 1870. His birthplace was, it says Arkansas, and as we know, they were the first colored family in Emporia, Kansas. It says his race was white. Now, don't get confused about when it says white as the race. When I first started genealogy some time ago, that was a bit of a confusion, because I would look at different records and it would say white, but white just means race, not color. The people or those who came in from Europe on boats as indentured servants, whether Irish, English, German, they were considered white race, but many of them were black people also, or had dark skin, or were melanated people. There were a lot of melanated people who came here on ships from Europe. And so the white race just means European or from Europe. And so as we can see here, this Henry O'Dear and the spouse, D.C. O'Dear, we read about her. And we know about some of these names that were Anderson O'Dear, Joseph O'Dear. These were also names, Abraham Lincoln O'Dear. These were also names, and there is here Ellen O'Dear. There's Ellen. And she was 10 years old. So this is the O'Dear family, and so don't get confused by when it says here that the race is white, because that just means that they came here from Europe, or that they were that they might have been Christian, or that they were English speaking. That's all that meant. And so in regards to what it means to be white, the definition of white didn't change until 1924 with the Racial Integrity Act. And if you have some time, you can look that up. The Racial Integrity Act of 1924. I mean, I can, if you want, I can do it just a little bit for you, just so y'all don't have to do the hard work. Integrity Act. Yep, here we go. Racial Integrity Act of 1944. One such policy was Racial Integrity Act, which was passed in Virginia in 1944, prohibiting interracial marriage, and ushered a long period of discriminatory racial designations administered by the government. And so, yes, Racial Integrity Act. Look into that, because that's where white became more about color. Here's Walter Plecker. White became a matter of color and not a matter of origin or where you were from. All right, so Racial Integrity Act. But back to O'Dear. Where was I? Okay, here we go. Henry O'Dear, and we have some more records of Mr. O'Dear. It looks like he did say he had some land, and according to that article, he had land in Oklahoma and had affidavits trying to get that land back. But as you can see here, he Henry O'Dear might have been a part of a Cherokee tribe at one time. It did say he belonged to the Indians. And a lot of the Indians and the Negroes, there was a lot of intermixing among them, and so there were many children who were considered mulattoes, but that the designation of mulatto was they were mixed with Negro and Indian. And you find this in a lot of different records. But as you can see, Henry O'Dear, he had enrolled for Cherokee status, but he was denied. Let's see here. Looks like Henry O'Dear, he was in Lyons. This is the same Henry O'Dear. Here it is, his race. He was considered white, or being from Europe. And Lyons, Kansas. So these are just a few of about Henry O'Dear. And I wasn't able to, let's see, D.C. O'Dear, if she has. Let's just do a search. She also is of, as you can see, this is her record from the 1870, I'm going to say 1870 census. Let me move this. Yep, this is her record from the 1870 census. All right. Let's go back to the tree. All right. Let's just do a quick search and see what we find about DC, a deer. Okay. We may have a photo. Private. Understood. Yeah, having some issues. Okay, here we go. DC, a deer. Emporia, Kansas. Yep. She was in laundry, washing. DC, a deer. Looks like here we have, she also filed for to be on the Dolls roll, on the Dolls card for the 5 civilized tribes, and as you can see here, it might have been rejected, or it was rejected. Okay. DC, a deer. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there were many deers. But what's interesting about the deer name, and as you can see, it does state that she was born in Kansas. What's interesting about that is there was a man named James Adair. And James Adair, he wrote a book called The History of the American Indians. And just a little bit about James Adair. He was, it's speculated that he was born around 1709 in Atrium, Ireland. He was born in Ireland. And by 1709. And by 1730, Adair lived and traded with the Catawba in 1735. However, the Catawba struggled with alcohol and pressure from neighboring indigenous communities and minimized their trading power. Adair moved farther west, solidifying relationships with the Cherokee in 1736, with the French in Louisiana and Spanish in Florida, straining English Carolinian trade and threatening the existence of the colony. South Carolina's Governor William Bull engaged Adair around 1738 to encourage the Chickasaw to settle in New Windsor on the Savannah River to fortify the colony's defense. After decades among the Chickasaw, Adair came to refer to himself as an English Chickasaw, an English warrior. So it seems as though he amalgamated with the Chickasaw, and I've seen in other sources that he took a Indian wife. Adair claims he resided and transacted with the Native American communities in the Southeast United States for 4 decades. That's 40 years. He was among the Native Americans, and during this time he also participated in South Carolina's political scene. However, a history of the American Indians in 1775 established his legacy. Published in London on the eve of the Revolution and categorized as a ethnohistory, Adair's text argues that the Native Americans descended from Jews and were the lost tribes of Israel. The argument represented a form of colonial and ordering that began with the arrival of the Spanish in Americas. So as you can see, this Adair came and traded amongst James Adair. He traded amongst the Indians, and if you go further down, it is estimated that James Adair died in 1738 in North Carolina. And here we have DC Adair. If I can find it, DC Adair. DC Adair, she was born in North Carolina. And if you remember, according to the article, the pronunciation is Adair and not Odeer. And so there could be some relation to Miss Adair, DC Adair, better known as Aunt Adair, being that she was born in North Carolina. There could be some relation to her and to this James Adair. Now, I'm not sure whether now there is also Henry Adair, who I'm not sure if they, if she took his last name or how that actually worked. I know Native Americans kind of do things, they did things differently. It was more so of a maternal, they took on maternal names and not paternal. Like I know, we take on our father's names, or it's common to take on the father's last name. But in Indian tribes, or in some Indian tribes, I've read that it was common to take on the maternal name. But it'd be interesting to see if they are some relation, and if they are, what a full circle moment. The fact that James Adair wrote the history of the Native Americans, and he came to the conclusion that the Native Americans descended from Jews and were the lost 10 tribes. And here we have Miss Ellen Burton and DC Adair, who could be a descendant, ending up in a church where the leader or the prophet that established the church, he came to the conclusion that the Negroes are the true Jews. William S. Crowdy was he said that that the Negroes are the that he found the 9.5 lost tribes of Israel. Here it is. Are the lost tribes found? Oh, this is not the clip. Let me find the clip. Thank y'all for those who are still watching the video. Let me see. Let me see. Plainfield. This is a Plainfield Passover they wrote. Let's see. In the Plainfield. Here we go. We'll do this one. It says all Jews are Negroes, feet washing blacks who swamp a town claim to be the chosen race. Plainfield, New Jersey is swamped with hundreds of Negroes, members of the Church of God and Saints of Christ, who claim that the only genuine Jews are Negroes. So many of them came there from many parts of the country to celebrate the Passover that all the lodging were filled, and 500 men and women walked the streets with no place to sleep. The members of the church who wash each other's feet and kiss each other on meeting assert that Solomon and Abraham were Negroes, and that they are descendants of Abraham and the chosen people of God and his children. So here we have Saint Ellen Burton and her mother DC Burton, who joined a church that say that the Jews are Negroes, and possibly, and I'm almost for certain, here we have her descendant, possibly her descendant, came to the same conclusion years before when he wrote A History of the American Indians, claiming that the natives were Jews and the lost tribes of Israel. That's a full circle moment. That's called, I see that as, my sheep know my voice, and a stranger they will not follow. But when I stumbled across this read and this story, it was a very, very moving, and it just opened my eyes and opened my mind to just history and the importance of the Church of God and Saints of Christ, and even with this Adair family, who were the first colored family in Emporia, and the important role that they played, and the important role that Chief Ellen Burton played in the church of God and Saints of Christ, and so I just wanted to bring her story back. There may be a part 2, there may be a part 3. I'm just continuing on, finding interesting stories and bringing their stories back. Now the next video might not be 50 minutes long. Of course, this video had a lot of pieces that I was able to tie together, but yeah, this is the first episode of Oh Bring Them Back. I hope you enjoyed some of the information. Feel free to comment and leave a like, and you can message me if you have even more information, or even if I left out something. Please send me your information. I'm just reporting what I see, and not necessarily what I know from first-hand account. Many of the sources that I find are from newspaper and from census records. Same information that most scholars find their information, but I'm just presenting what I find, and I pray and hope that you enjoyed this episode. But until next time, I pray you have a wonderful and blessed day, and until we meet again, Lord willing, we're going to try to bring them back. Peace.